Millennials hitting pause on their careers. The Wall Street Journal reporting many young professionals are taking early career breaks to reassess and chart different paths. Joining me now, Wall Street Journal columnist Krithika Varagur. Krithika, I apologize if I didn't pronounce your name correctly. You must correct me if I mispronounced it. But just tell me about what you've been writing about in terms of millennials changing course in their professional lives.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's been called the Great Resignation in terms of the number of people who are quitting their jobs. It's certainly the most in this millennium. But within that phenomenon of people leaving their jobs, I realized there are a lot of different reasons people do it. And especially for millennials who are now ages 25 to 40, a growing number of them are not jumping to a new full-time job, but just taking a break. They are saying, I don't want another full-time job right now. I want to hit pause, maybe learn some new skills, take a breather, and maybe plot a new direction in my career. So that's one phenomenon that I covered in my latest column for the Journal.
Is it because of the fatigue from working from home can cause kind of work exhaustion, if you will, because many people will work many more hours when they're tethered to their home or their apartment, their desk, number one. But number two is also the realization, well, and there are plentiful jobs out there, particularly if you're in the technology industry, but also the the kind of realization that life is short and I need to really love what I do for a living.
You're totally right. Both of those things are relevant here. I think from the negative factor, a lot of people are chastened by pandemic burnout. Their job descriptions went out the window. They took on more than ever before. In the case of one, theater professional I spoke with, the thing that she most loved about our industry, which was live performances, disappeared. And there's so many examples of that across various industries like hospitality. So they're in no rush to find another job that they might get locked into for an indefinite period of time. And on the other hand, they're also optimistic about their prospects in the economic recovery, because it's never been such a tight labor market in a very long time. And the job openings and the signing bonuses and the recruiters reaching out, all of those are very much in the air right now. So these people who are taking a career break are feeling confident that whatever they do next, there'll be more opportunities for them than there were last year.
Lee Carter, jump in here.
A little bit, this age group is in the perfect storm because it's often when people reevaluating your life anyway, somewhere between 30 and 40, you're saying, what am I doing? So much of life is about inertia. And now there's been this moment of great reevaluation. I think one of the things that's so different, right, is that people are jumping ship without another job. And that's not something that you usually see. A lot of people take a step back in their career around that time and say, what do I want to do with my life? But to just take a leap without another job, what does that mean for this workforce? I mean, people are confident they're going to get them because there's so many jobs available right now. Is that what we think is going to happen for the future? What happens to their benefits? What happens to this whole generation that's just taken a step back and not working?
I think it really reflects the kind of manic energy that's in the air right now in terms of job prospects and earning potential and income streams for freelancers, because it really does undergird all these decisions that I think, as you're right, people wouldn't have made this kind of thing last year or maybe before, especially when you consider benefits and things like that. But I think the pandemic really made people reevaluate what they spend the majority of their lives doing, which is work. And whether that's putting aside more time for their creative goals, which would require maybe not taking another full-time job and taking that risk, or really taking a few months off to change fields or pick a new career path. I think people are making the calculation that the benefits or the potential benefits outweigh the risks, at least in the short term. Also, I think it's relevant that the people I'm writing about aren't like Gen Zers. They're not just graduated. They're not new in the workforce. Most of them have several years of savings in the bank that factor into their decision to take a break like this. A lot of them are also still doing part-time work like bartending or freelancing. They just don't want to get locked into this other 9-to-5 job until they're really sure about the next steps. So I think, as you said, it's a perfect storm of what's in the economy right now and how the pandemic made people reevaluate how they spend their lives.
I had a long, not to digress, Krithika, but I had a long conversation with the late Jack Welch, who ran General Electric famously. And he was always interested in hearing about people's job experiences. And I said, I was never afraid to quit a job. If I was my very first journalism job by accident, I was making really good money, but I knew that I would not, it was going to be a dead end, that I would be in that job for years and years and years. And it paid a nice wage, given it was journalism, but you have to quit and be willing to fail at trying something new. So there's a willingness to quit and a willingness to fail if you really want to explore bigger opportunities. And those were kind of great words to live by. And that was also from my father, who taught me that. I want to move on to Google is pushing back its return to the office until January. And you've got all these new young professionals emerging who have never worked in an office before. They started careers during the pandemic even. You mentioned Gen Zers. Do you think it will be hard for them to ever work in an office, or maybe they'll love it?
It's really hard to tell. I think that it's a distinct microgeneration that's like someone like me, who's a millennial. I'm in my 20s too. I can't relate to this particular experience of starting your whole career while working remotely. And I think it's pretty odd. A lot of the young people I spoke with said they felt like they were missing some of the milestones of adult life, because if you're starting a remote job, there's no rush to like move to a new city and find your first post-college apartment. A lot of people have been starting these jobs from their parents' homes, where they spent most of the pandemic. A lot of them graduated and finished out their senior year also remotely. A lot of them didn't graduate in person from college. So it's just like this snowballing effect of more and more of the milestones of young adulthood are becoming virtual. And I think it's a pretty interesting dynamic. I think most of the people I spoke with are eager to go into an office, because it's such a big part of our culture when you think about it. There are TV shows about it. It's like just part of daily life. And you see your parents going to work every day. And a lot of the youngest 20-somethings in the workforce have no idea what that's about. Some of them might have done internships where they know what an office is like, and they know that it can be fun to be there and learn from people, but they know that it's not possible for them right now. So it's a pretty interesting, as one of the people I spoke to said, limbo in their lives right now.
Yeah, it's like celebrating people's birthdays, kind of half-stale sheet cake and drinks after work. It's all of those things that build build community. Krithika, thank you so much for being here. I hope to see you again very soon. Krithika